When do you become an adult? Is it your first zit?
Circles are just really unfortunate right now.
Your first date?
This blue dress with my low.
It's like a wave kind of.
The day you turn 13?
I turned 13, which means I'm a teenager now.
Getting my first car.
Or maybe 21?
21 today.
In truth, it's not that clear-cut. Here in the US, you can vote at one age, drink alcohol at another, and remain independent on your parents' taxes and health insurance for even longer than that. And that can make figuring out when you're supposed to adult a bit tricky. Truth be told, it's not a new problem. Throughout human history, the transition we call adolescence has always been difficult, confusing, messy. When you're a teenager, you're kind of between two worlds. You're leaving the comforts and carefree days of childhood behind and stepping into the challenges and responsibilities that adulthood brings. But when exactly should you make that change? And more importantly, how? How do you convince other people, and quite often even convince yourself, that you're not a kid anymore, that you're ready to stand up and strike out on your own? On this episode, we'll hear from Harvard psychology professor Leah Somerville about the adolescent brain.
It's not a mini adult brain or a mega child brain. It's its own thing.
And the Western world's current stretched period of adolescence.
Even just a couple of generations ago, people were expected to get married around the end of high school. So there seems to be some very rapidly changing expectations and also desires of adolescents.
And from religion scholar Connor Wood about how religions all over the world have found some pretty brilliant and sometimes surprising ways to help usher young people through these challenging times.
All the young kids are scared out of camp by adults dressed up as spirits and then taken to a secret hut.
From the Amazon rainforest to the suburbs of Massachusetts, we'll hear how ceremony and symbol, both large and small, can help teenagers cross the threshold to adulthood. I'm Dave DeSteno, and this is How God Works. There are many mileposts along the road of life, points where our status, our responsibilities, and even our sense of self changes. And when you look around the world, many of these shifts in roles have rituals to mark them, getting married, retiring, and even preparing for death. But the first, and the one that's really necessary for most of the others, is the transition to adulthood. Because we don't just one day say to a teen, okay, today you're an adult, good luck. To mark and facilitate that transition, there's almost always a ritual.
Rituals take processes that are messy and analog, like maturation, and make them binary and digital. So they clarify what's going on. There is no point biologically where you can say, I'm a man, right? It's a decade-long process of going from being a child to an adult, or in some cases 20 years long, or who knows, it can extend.
Connor Wood is a research scholar at Boston University's Center for Mind and Culture. He's also something of an expert on how rituals affect our minds.
Because being an adult is not a biological state purely, it's also a social role. And the ritual adds a level of clarity on top of this long, messy, unclear biological process, so that it's clear to recognize for everybody, okay, maybe this kid doesn't have any more hair on his face than he did yesterday. It's not the biological process that we're pointing out. It's the social fact that he has just gone through an initiation, and bam, now we're going to hold him to adult responsibilities.
Many religious coming-of-age rituals aren't actually all that religious, at least not in the spiritual sense. It's less about connecting to or proving yourself to God, and more about connecting to and proving yourself to your community. As Connor said, many of these rituals are primarily social in nature. But besides clarifying when a change in social role occurs, rites of passage also help it to happen. There's a structure to them, one meant to take apart and reconstitute how everyone, including the teens themselves, perceive this change.
Arnold van Gennep was a thinker in the early 20th century who coined the idea of an initiation, a rite of passage, rites-of-passage. He posited there's kind of like a tripartite structure to a lot of rites of passage. There's a leaving your old role. That's the first stage. The second stage is kind of a liminal space in between the roles where you're outside of the rules, you're outside of the game for a little bit. And then there's a return and a reintegration in your new role. You find that in examples like New Guinea, where for initiation ritual, all the young kids are scared out of camp by adults dressed up as spirits at night. and then taken to a secret hut where they learn the lore of their tribe and learn how to use the secret tools, feathers and bull roarers. It's a totally eerie experience, and you are out in the woods. Everything's been deconstructed. In the middle of this rite of passage, you are not in normal life. You're no longer a kid. You're not an adult. You're neither male nor female. You're often maybe naked. You're not allowed to bathe. All the things that would normally kind of like give you clarity about what your social role is, they get stripped away. It's only when you enter into the third phase that you reincorporate and you put clothes back on and you can start bathing again and you can be a new person with a new role.
That liminal state is kind of like a ritualized way of breaking you out of your normal expectations of who you are and where you are so that it can be reformulated, basically.
Exactly. So the thing about adolescence is that you start to become aware of the fact that a lot of your environment is arbitrary. And so you become at risk for what I call Holden Caulfield syndrome, the main character in Catcher in the Rye, who thinks that everything is phony. It's just the most dreary book to read if you've already gone through adolescence because you're like, oh, this kid is so annoying. But when you are an adolescent, there is a sense where you start to think like, wait a minute, all these rules are just made up. Why should I obey them? There's the potential to think about that. And I think that's part of the reason why initiation rites tend to cluster around adolescence.
Right, because there was a feeling we needed something there. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Many of these initiation rites can be primarily psychological, a feat of mental and emotional strength. But for the Satere Mawe tribe in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, the proving ground is physical. It's painful. It's called the Walmot, or the bullet dance ceremony. The boys around the age of 12 or 13 prove their manhood by enduring the stings of hundreds of bullet ants, so called because the pain of their sting is just about on par with being shot. And since most of us fortunately don't know what that feels like, just think of a bee sting, and then imagine that pain being about 30 times worse. The pain from the sting is usually also accompanied by vomiting, shaking, and sometimes even mild paralysis for up to 24 hours. Each boy wears elaborately constructed gloves lined with the ants, stingers pointed in, and tries not to cry out. The more stoic they remain, the more capable, manly, adult they prove themselves to be to the village elders looking on. Showing no emotion, no fear or shying away from the suffering, marks a teen boy as a worthy male member of the tribe. On the other side of the world, young Maasai boys have to endure a ritualized circumcision without wincing to prove that they're ready for adulthood. And among the Apache in America's Southwest, teenage girls take part in the sunrise ceremony, continuously dancing for hours on end in an open field until near exhaustion. Only then do they prove to their tribe they are on their way to becoming a woman. So why is enduring extreme physical pain so common in rites of passage?
I think one of the key reasons why fortitude and enduring pain are such central features of many initiation rituals is because life is actually painful. Like life is hard. And in a small group where you kind of need to be able to rely on one another, just think about it. If you've got two tribes living on different sides of the forest, and one of them is populated by people who are just really averse to pain and don't like discomfort, and the other one is full of people who are completely willing to suffer discomfort if needed, which one's going to survive longer? Which one's going to have a better chance of wresting food out of the wilderness? Hunting is painful. Gathering food is painful. Doing horticulture, slash and burn gardening, like many groups do in the Amazon, is hard. It's hard work. So you want to be able to show that during the transition to adulthood that you're telling people, okay, now you're going to be an adult and it's going to be hard. Nobody's going to be bringing food to you anymore. You're going to need to be able to be willing to accept pain. And here's your ticket that you're going to be able to demonstrate to us that you can do that.
Yeah, in fact, one of the predominant cues we look for as humans when we decide if we can trust someone, if we can rely on them, is the notion of self-control and competence. But if you can show everybody around you that you have the self-control and the fortitude to take the pain of these challenges, that's that cue that you're saying that, okay, When push comes to shove, I think I can count on this person.
Yeah, exactly.
As we move to more industrialized societies, something changes though. Adolescent rites of passage don't tend to involve enduring pain, at least not of the physical type. Take Jewish bar and bat mitzvahs. There are prayers to learn, projects to do, and speeches to give. Why the difference? Maybe studying and good deeds are just another way to prove a teen has competence and fortitude. In these places, success depends less on physical strength.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, that there are religions of the book, right? You have sacred texts, you have scriptures and so forth. And so you need to internalize certain prescriptions, ideas, theological concepts. And so there's a kind of like cultural preservation function going on with those kinds of non-physically painful initiation rites. I don't think that modern life is really any less. I think maybe it's less physically painful, but it certainly doesn't, I don't think it requires any less fortitude, to be honest. If you want to have a family, if you want to support kids, if you want to make a splash in your career or just kind of succeed in life, you will have to know how to deal with adversity and pain and suffering. You'll have to get up early, study late, forego current rewards for later rewards. Don't go out to this party because you got to study for the bar so you can be a lawyer and so forth. So, the idea that we don't need to suffer is just not true. We definitely, life is going to entail quite a bit of suffering. So I think that there's a way in which initiation rites could, if they're properly calibrated, put people through enough of an ordeal that it just kind of gives you a domain general idea of the need to be able to be courageous in the face of difficulty.
Rites of passage make perfect sense for a lot of reasons. They help teens prove to themselves and to others that they have some grit, that they can be relied upon when the going gets tough, whether that going involves physical challenges or mental ones. Still, why do most of them take place so early? Why not, say, in the mid-20s, when it's clear that most people have matured? You could wonder whether it might even be a little cruel to put a young person at the height of their physical awkwardness and self-consciousness to a public challenge. But according to neuroscientist Leah Somerville, these are the very features of adolescence that make it the perfect time to nudge young people toward adulthood. And a lot of that has to do with the adolescent brain.
There are many unique features of the adolescent brain. It's not a mini adult brain or a mega child brain. It's its own thing. For one, brain structure is continuing to fine-tune itself. And so adolescent brains can sort of integrate more sources of information, do so more quickly and consistently than what we see in childhood. And self-control, broadly speaking, is continuing to fine-tune itself as well. So we can think of an adolescent brain as one that's highly attuned to emotional and reward cues, as well as becoming more sculpted and efficient.
So it sounds like it's in kind of a stage of plasticity where it's trying to iterate to what it's going to need to do to be a responsible adult, to have that self-control of our impulses, but also to figure out what it is that I need to do to function in this world. So at a higher level, does that mean that the identity of adolescence is kind of in flux as well?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that aspect of development, because something that's really important to understand about brain development is that it doesn't occur in a vacuum. It's actually a product of the experiences that people are having. So during adolescence, one major challenge they face has to do with making increasingly independent and also consequential choices about how to behave in their worlds. So adolescents are navigating a world where the challenges that they're facing are very real and even life-altering in terms of setting their futures. But at the same time, they have a fairly shallow experience base to draw from in deciding how to behave or what goals to set or how to attain them. And this is sculpted in a back and forth process where these practice in these spaces facilitates brain development. And brain development then in turn facilitates more and more mature processing in these domains. So we can think of them as like highly, highly intertwined. And that's why I think the intersection of psychology and neuroscience is such an interesting space to be working in.
I didn't think about it that way, but it is kind of iterative, right? I try to develop my self-control, and then that helps me get better at it, and then I have a new challenge. So how does that self-control develop, do you think, and why is it important for adolescents?
So all humans are challenged to orchestrate self-control. I think our ability to exercise self-control also depends on the sort of setup of our environment, and creating predictable spaces for us to succeed can help us. But in adolescence, a lot of their worlds are less predictable than adults. This especially includes their social worlds, where friendships and other sort of social alliances are highly dynamic during adolescence. And so they're facing a more unpredictable social sphere.
Yeah, you have to show self-control to be able to prove yourself, right? If the adults in the community are going to welcome you as an adult, they have to know that you're going to succeed, that when push comes to shove, they can rely on you. And so that raises the point to me of whether and I think you've hinted at this, whether the adolescent brain is really attuned to the expectations of other people. Because I might want to say that I'm now an adult, but if the other people around me don't treat me like that, it's going to be hard to maintain that identity. And so is it fair to say that the adolescent brain is especially tuned to what others think of them, especially those in higher status?
Yeah, that's definitely what the research would suggest. For one, adolescents tend to spend a tremendous uptick in time with their peers, as opposed to during childhood, where much of time is spent in the family unit. This requires independent creation of new social relationships and practicing maintaining them. So figuring out how to be a good, reliable friend or romantic partner or what have you. Adolescents also are very motivated by their social standing and to know about their social standing. They are very interested in status and knowing their place in the pecking order. So we, in my research team, have demonstrated that adolescents are more willing to work in an experiment setup to find out what other people thought of them than adults are. Adults are mildly interested in finding this out. But an adolescent, on average, is very willing to work to find out whether somebody rated a picture of them nicely or not so nicely. And that's even true when they expect that that is going to be negative feedback. Even when they predict that that guy isn't going to like me, they still want the information, which I think is just testament to just how powerful the social world is to them and their place within it. You know, some people might hear about a finding like that and think that that seems very irrational or kind of like mistaken objectives. But we think about it a little bit differently, because finding out what other people think about you is a very powerful way to sort of entrain your self-understanding of where you fit in your social world. And so the value of that information seems to be extra potent to adolescents, even when it's information that tells them that they're not doing so great. But thinking about broader cultural contexts of trying to transition into an adult role, momentous occasions that would mark in time when a person sort of shifts group alliances or group identities would similarly be very valuable to someone of this age, because it gives them the information they would need to understand where they fit socially.
How about this idea, though, of risk as well, right? A lot of adults think that adolescents take a lot of unnecessary risks, either because they're not willing to think far enough ahead, or they don't have the ability to actually control themselves.
Yeah. A lot of common sense accounts of adolescent decision making is that they have some kind of faulty mechanisms in place, right? That like whatever it is that allows us to make well-reasoned decisions seems to be absent or not working quite right in an adolescent mind. So a different way to think about adolescent decision making is that they're just weighing information about their choices differently in a way that actually represents a very rational way to go about making choices. Adolescents are more interested in the here and now when it comes to the decisions that they're making. Another thing that we've seen in our research is that adolescents do have a heightened willingness to take risks and also to make decisions when they don't know anything about what's going to happen. So when the outcomes are wildly uncertain, they're like, I'll try it. So they're sort of willing to opt in to decisions that adults might sometimes shy away from, and that engaging in the sort of garden variety risks that may have some small negative consequences rather than big ones, that might actually be facilitating future decision making through this trial and error learning.
And when it comes to taking risks, adolescents are even more inclined to do it when that risk means a climb in social status. But the surprising thing, according to Leah, is that the risks young people take often aren't as important or impressive to their peers as they'd predict. So while adolescents might believe that it's going to make them look cool to swipe a bottle from their parents' liquor cabinet to share with their friends, they're often wrong.
So it could even be sort of a case of mistaken motives that might be leading adolescents to take risks while their friends are watching, whether or not their friends actually would really like them to do such a thing.
Showing grit and self-control by taking safe risks, however, do matter to the adults around. It's not just a petty popularity contest to show who has more. It makes evolutionary sense. As we talked about with Connor, difficult rites of passage, where there are risks posed as tests, are meant to show everyone, hey, look at me. I'm ready for prime time.
Maybe that serves as a bid of like, look, I can do the adult things. I'm ready for it.
You're also asking them to do it at the moment in brain development when they care most about what you think. And so they're willing to do it.
That's right. It could serve as a really strong motivator, especially if the outcome of that rite of passage is a bump in status.
Yeah. But this raises another question, which is there a single right age to adults? I mean, you were saying, a lot of adolescence is an iterative process where I try and exert self-control through other skills, and then I learn more and my brain continues to develop more. And so, if you look at American society, right, you can vote at one age, you can drink at another age, you can be responsible for your, medical decisions at another age. And so there is no one age at which you become an adult. Does it make sense to have one age, or should we really be doing this as different competencies develop in their brains?
As you might imagine, development unfolds slowly and steadily, and there's huge amounts of variability across people. So somebody could achieve a developmental milestone years before somebody else. And, choosing a birthday doesn't really account for that. That's not a very convenient answer for policy or society because we wouldn't want to consider people immature so long. But the truth is the brain is always changing throughout our whole lives, and there's no marker that signals that your brain is fully cooked. There's many, many markers of brain maturity that unfold along different timelines. And so a different perspective would be to not focus so much on the brain, but to focus on behavior. When could a person express certain competencies that would indicate, that they're mature or that they're capable of handling the responsibilities of drinking or voting or getting married or what have you? We also don't have any consensus on what those competencies should be or what test a person would need to pass. And so I think this represents a fundamental point of disconnection between the complicated, slow and steady scientific account of what development looks like and the kind of bright lines that policy needs.
While it's true society set different ages at which people can vote, open a bank account, etc., there is one kind of universal, the age at which you can have children. And perhaps surprisingly, that happens everywhere well before our brains are fully matured. But why? After all, having a child is one of the most demanding and difficult jobs there is.
You'd think that it would be nice to have a more mature brain sooner, right? The kind of adolescence that Western industrialized teenagers experience is extremely different looking than the kinds of expectations for people of that same age, even like 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. I mean, even just a couple of generations ago, people were expected to get married around the end of high school, right? So there seems to be some very rapidly changing expectations and also desires of adolescents of just how dependent or independent they choose to be. And that I think that's a rapid cultural shift that's occurred, and people have written about it with lots of concern. I think from a theoretical perspective, then waves of brain development would follow along this slower timeline.
By changing what the culture is doing or expecting of us, it would actually slow the brain development.
Well, because brain development is a product of the kinds of challenges and experiences that an individual is facing. It's sort of in training itself through experience. If we restrict or modify those experiences, in turn, brain development by definition would change.
I think most parents would think about, oh, maybe my child's not ready for this yet. But by not providing them the challenge, it's not that they're not ready for it, you're actually slowing the actual progression. I mean, this brings up the whole idea of the coddling of the American mind, right? And there's been lots of debates about, should we give our kids more independence, let them fail more? And on the other side, there's the helicoptering parents. We both know we're college professors. You get a lot of the helicopter parenting about. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I think that there's something important to note about that, which is that accelerated or slowed brain development isn't necessarily better or worse. So we might think, oh, brain development's slowing down. That must be bad. I don't think it's necessarily bad. We have no proof that it's bad. What it means is that windows of plasticity and the effects of experience are continuing longer. So we might say, if we prematurely close those, then we might not be practicing ourselves for adult roles to the greatest potential. But if we close them too late, maybe there would be some cost to that. But scientifically, knowing what is the optimal timeline is actually something that is extremely hard to pin down, and something I think there's no consensus on. So we might have like a common sense idea that slowing down development would be a problem, or speeding up development would be a problem. I don't think we know. To be fair, I don't think we know what the optimal timeline would be.
I want to close by asking you this, which is, there are a lot of parents out there, some of whom are probably listening to this, who are having different concerns. One is, I want my kid to grow up. They seem just like they're happy to be a kid, and they're getting older, and
Sure.
I want them to be mature and independent. And then there are other ones who are like, my kid's too independent. I want them, they're not ready for this yet. And so if you were talking to parents and you were going to give them some advice about how to ease their kid and support their child through a successful adolescence, what would those few kind of rules of thumb be?
I think that the most valuable thing parents can provide at this period is a safe home base. Beyond that, I think encouraging independent activities, encouraging youth to take safe risks, a new educational route, trying a new job, trying a new hobby, traveling somewhere. Most of those activities will bring tremendous learning opportunities. And I think if we value learning as being one of the key goals of adolescence, I think parents can try to encourage seeking out things that might be a little bit unfamiliar in service of facilitating that learning. But providing a safe base to return and receive support is also a really helpful thing for adolescents to know that they have. Each person is different. People develop along all different timelines, and that's normal and healthy to a point. And so I think that appreciating them for where they're at might be a helpful perspective in that case.
Since we all do develop along different timelines, maybe there isn't one right age to adult. Maybe adolescence, all of us really, should be treated as works in progress. And in modern industrialized societies, where we seem to be stretching out adolescence, maybe our constant evolution isn't such a bad thing. It just might be giving our children more time to fine-tune their capacities to enter the adult world. Still, it would help to have some ritual markers along the way, some way for everyone to agree that a teen is ready to take on some new responsibilities and to make sure that development doesn't ever just stall. At each step, teens would have to demonstrate mastery of a new ability or skill to their family and peers. It might sound a little hokey, But in fact, there's already a system that works exactly like this. Scouting's merit badges, which are now open to both sexes.
And an Eagle Scout, but I was able to learn and apply all of these.
Teens develop skills and complete service projects to earn badges given at ceremonies. They're for things like personal fitness and management, citizenship, emergency preparedness, and communication skills. And the end result, Eagle Scout, means an adolescent is fully matured, ready to be a valued member of the community.
I really thank everyone who helped to make that dream into a goal and helped to transform that goal into a reality.
And it kind of works. Surveys show it gives an added sheen to resumes. I'm serious. Employers do take note of whether somebody was an Eagle Scout and see it as a positive. Or another example is sports. Freshman team to junior varsity to varsity is a clear progression that marks mastery and acceptance. Now, I'm not suggesting all teens have to be a scout or a varsity athlete, but I think the model is a good one for adolescents. We might benefit from a few smaller rites of passage rather than a single big one. Families and friends might want to set goals and mark successes around the mini milestones throughout the adolescent years. Not just the official ones like driver's licenses and voting and drinking, but other subtler achievements, first job, first bank account, first apartment, things like that. The trick, though, is that each has to be some sort of challenge, where a teen must demonstrate some grit and competence. And afterward, there has to be some recognition for it. Exactly when, where, and how each challenge takes place and is celebrated can vary. We can meet teens where they are. By appealing to a young mind primed for risk, approval, and acceptance, these rituals can nudge development along while providing some safe scaffolding too. Next time, while the transition to adulthood is marked by independence and self-sufficiency, we humans aren't really built to be alone. So the next major milestone marks a transition back towards interdependence. But marriage today is a whole different ballgame than it was in the past. It's not just a practical partnership anymore. It's about love, romance, friendship, intimacy, basically a kind of merging of identities that, for some, can even be a source of meaning in life. And that can put a lot of pressure on people.
We have thrown a tremendous amount of psychological responsibility on this one relationship. It didn't used to be that your spouse was also supposed to be your best friend and your primary intellectual sparring partner and all those roles.
We'll talk to Eli Finkel, author of The All or Nothing Marriage, about how expectations for marriage have changed over time and what that means for wedded bliss.
Less expectation in terms of basic survival sorts of things, a lot more expectations in terms of the big psychological sorts of things. It's really those higher expectations where you get this profound sense of richness and meaning and purpose to set aspirations, to make the relationship better, to work at the relationship.
And with Rachel Alba, a certified sexologist with a degree in theology, about how many religions, including Christianity, offer advice to help people grow in their marriage and even spiritually through, well, sex.
The idea that sex could actually be something that brought us closer to God and was a massive gift from God to humans in order to find more connection with the divine and with each other was something that was taught regularly at Mass.
The links between religion and romance are often fraught, but that doesn't mean there isn't some hidden wisdom lurking there if you take a deep dive. Wisdom that just might reinvigorate your relationship and your soul. So join us for this special 2-episode exploration of love coming next on How God Works. How God Works is hosted and written by me, Dave DeSteno. Our senior producer is Josie Holtzman of Future Projects. Associate producer is Sophie Eisenberg. Our executive producer is Genevieve Sponsler. Music and post-production mix and master by Merritt Jacob. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. This podcast was also made possible with support from the John Templeton Foundation.